Okay, so
Mm.
hands on the wheel, everyone, because today we're going to change how you think about mountain
Oh,
driving.
this is going to be good.
But we're not talking about, conquering those uphill climbs, that satisfying feeling as you reach the peak. Today is all about the descent and how to master those winding roads with gravity as your co-pilot.
That's right. And it's interesting you use the word co-pilot because so many of us treat downhill driving like gravity is the enemy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right.
I'll admit I've definitely felt that tension in the brakes, as I'm trying to navigate a steep drop. But our source today really digs into the physics of it all, and I'm already starting to see things differently. How about you?
Yeah. That's the beauty of a good deep dive.
Yeah.
Our source highlights that most drivers focus on the weight of their car going uphill,
Right, right. Of course. Yeah.
but it's going downhill where that weight really becomes a force to be reckoned with.
That's so true. It's like the heavier your car, the more gravity wants to give you a little push, from behind.
Exactly. And the steeper the hill, the longer the descent, the more that push turns into something you really have to manage. Our source even suggests a little pre-trip homework here.
Okay, I like that. The
Pre-
trip homeward.
Before you even think about packing the snacks.
Oh, man.
Get to know your route.
Okay.
Talk to experienced drivers who know those roads like the back of their hand. It's amazing the insights you can gain about, potential hazards or tricky curves that you wouldn't find on a map.
That's such great advice. Local knowledge is gold, especially when you're talking about unpredictable mountain terrain. But there's one thing I've always wondered about, and that's speed limits. It's like those signs lose all meaning when you're heading downhill. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, you're not alone in feeling that way, right? It's like our intuition knows that the posted speed limit doesn't account for this invisible force pulling you down the road.
It really is, yeah. Our source really emphasized the need to think about safe speed differently when going downhill. But how do you actually determine what's safe, when you
Yeah.
factor in all those variables?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
got a bit of a mental calculation, but it becomes second nature with practice. Obviously, we've got the weight of your vehicle. That's key.
Right.
Imagine a fully loaded SUV barreling down the same hill as a compact car. The difference in momentum is significant, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Then there's the steepness and length of the hill itself.
Yeah.
The road conditions. Are we talking wet asphalt, dry pavement, gravel? And, of course, let's not forget our friend, the weather,
Right.
which can throw a wrench in everything.
Wow. It sounds like a lot to consider, but it also explains why so many people find mountain driving a bit intimidating. It's not just about steering and braking. It's about understanding how all these forces interact.
Precisely. And here's where things get really fascinating. Because even the shape of your car plays a role. You've probably heard about the push for more aerodynamic vehicles, right? Sleeker designs, less drag, all in the name of better fuel efficiency. But what's good for your gas mileage, might actually make it trickier to control your speed downhill.
So you're saying those sleek, fuel-efficient cars might actually need a little extra help from the braking system.
Exactly. It's almost counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Less wind resistance means gravity can pull you down the road with less opposition. Our source even points out that with some modern vehicles, you might need to downshift to a lower gear than what you use going uphill just to maintain a safe speed.
It's like physics is playing a prank on our efforts to be fuel efficient. It makes you realize how much we rely on those brakes. Speaking of brakes, I have to admit the idea of them overheating halfway down a mountain is, well, a bit terrifying. Our source mentioned brake fade, and I don't think I fully grasp how scary that could be.
Sure. Let's paint a picture, okay? You're cruising down a steep grade, feeling good about your mountain driving skills when you notice your speed picking up. No problem, you think, and you gently tap the brakes. But the car doesn't slow down as much as you expect, so you press a little harder, and still the deceleration isn't there. That, my friend, is the beginning of brake fade.
Okay, yeah, that's a chilling thought. It's like the brakes are slowly giving up on you just when you need them most. The source seems to really emphasize engine braking as the solution here, but I'll be honest, I've always found it a bit, confusing. When should you use it? How do you actually do it safely?
Well, our source frames it beautifully. Think of engine braking as your primary tool for controlling your speed downhill, and your actual brakes become the backup singers. There to support but not steal the show.
I like that analogy. So how do we give those engine brakes their time in the spotlight?
It starts with shifting your mindset. Instead of waiting until you're already hurtling downhill, get ahead of the game. Before you even start your descent, downshift to a lower gear. It's like choosing the right tool before you start a project, right? Trying to downshift once you're already going too fast can not only damage your transmission, it can be downright dangerous.
So it's all about anticipating the need for engine braking and preemptively making that shift.
Precisely. It takes a little practice to get the hang of it, but once you do, you'll find that it gives you a whole new level of control. Now, that doesn't mean you'll never touch your brakes on a downhill stretch, right? There are times when you'll need them, and our source provides a really helpful technique for using them effectively.
Right. It talked about finding that sweet spot between applying the brakes and letting them cool. What's the best way to do that?
Think of it as a gentle pulse rather than a constant squeeze. The source recommends what it calls a 3-second rule. Apply the brakes firmly enough to feel a definite slowdown, hold for about 3 seconds, and then release.
So it's about giving those brakes a chance to, like, breathe between applications. I can see how that would help prevent overheating.
Exactly. Now, here's where the mental game comes in.
Yeah.
As you release the brakes, your car will naturally start to pick up speed again. Don't panic. Instead of immediately hitting the brakes again, let the car coast a little, allowing gravity to do its thing. This is where knowing your route and anticipating the terrain ahead is so helpful. You'll learn to anticipate those moments when you can coast a bit and give your brakes a break.
It's like finding a rhythm between braking and coasting, working with the natural forces instead of constantly fighting against them.
That's a great way to put it. It's almost like a dance, wouldn't you say? But even the most skilled dancer needs a well-maintained dance floor. And when it comes to downhill driving, that dance floor is your braking system.
Our source was very clear about the importance of brake maintenance. And I think it's easy to underestimate that part, you know? We often just think about changing our brake pads when they get thin, but there's so much more to it than that.
You're absolutely right. Regular maintenance is about so much more than just replacing worn parts. It's about ensuring that your entire braking system is working in harmony, like a well-rehearsed orchestra. And one of the key instruments in that orchestra is brake adjustment.
Brake adjustment, I'll be honest, that's not something I've ever really thought about.
It's one of those subtle but crucial things. Our source explains that if your brakes aren't adjusted correctly, some parts of the system might be working overtime while others are, coasting along. You can end up with uneven wear and tear, and that can reduce your braking power overall. Imagine a choir where only half the singers know their parts. It's not going to sound as powerful or harmonious.
That's a great analogy. So brake adjustment is about making sure everything is working together smoothly and efficiently.
Exactly. And just like a choir needs a conductor to keep everyone in sync, your brake fluid is the unsung hero of the braking system. Checking your brake fluid level regularly is crucial.
So brake adjustment, brake fluid. What other maintenance must-dos does the source highlight?
Well, imagine this. You're cruising down the mountain, the scenery is breathtaking, and suddenly you hit the brakes only to hear a strange grinding noise.
Uh-oh.
That, my friend, could be the sound of worn brake pads, or even worse, problems with your rotors. Those are the metal discs that your brake pads clamp down on to slow your car. If you've ever heard that awful screeching sound when someone brakes, chances are their rotors are in rough shape.
Okay, that's not a sound I ever want to hear, especially not halfway down a mountain. So regular inspection of the brake pads and rotors is a must.
Absolutely. It's about catching those small issues before they turn into big, scary problems. And here's where it gets interesting. Remember, we talked about those what-if scenarios. Our source stresses the importance of being prepared for the unexpected. And that leads us to a topic that might seem a little intimidating at first, but it's really all about safety nets, escape ramps.
Right, those always seem like a last resort, something you hope you never have to use.
Think of them as emergency exits for your car. Imagine you're heading downhill and suddenly you realize your brakes aren't responding. Your heart starts racing, you're trying to downshift, but you're running out of road. That's when knowing where those escape ramps are located can be a lifesaver.
So they're strategically placed in areas where drivers might need them most.
Exactly. You'll often find them on long, steep downgrades, and they're usually marked with very clear signage. The source actually explains a bit about the physics behind how they work, which I found fascinating.
Okay, so how do they actually slow a car down?
They use this clever combination of physics and engineering. They're designed to be much steeper than the actual road, and they're usually filled with a bit of loose material like gravel or sand. As a car enters the ramp, the loose material creates friction, and that friction helps to slow the vehicle down.
It's like intentionally driving into a giant sandbox, but in a good way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It might seem, counterintuitive to steer your car off the road, but in those emergency situations, escape ramps can be the difference between a near miss and a major accident.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into the world of downhill driving. We've covered the mechanics of engine braking, the importance of brake maintenance, the mental game of, staying calm under pressure, and even those just-in-case safety nets like escape ramps.
And if there's one key takeaway I hope our listeners remember, is that downhill driving is about finding a balance between using your brakes and engine braking, a balance between confidence and caution, and a balance between respecting the power of gravity and learning to work with it, not against it.
So well said. It's about approaching those winding roads with both skill and awareness, and remembering that the journey down the mountain can be just as exhilarating as the climb to the top.
Exactly. And as you navigate those downhill stretches, remember this. Think of your descent as a series of controlled releases of energy rather than a constant battle against gravity. This shift in perspective can make a world of difference in how smoothly and safely you navigate those mountain roads.
Such a powerful image to end on. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this incredible deep dive, and to our listeners for joining us on this journey. Until next time, happy and safe travels, everyone.